welcome everyone to PACTV's second open mic in collaboration with the Kingston Public Library. I'm Elizabeth, and this is an inclusive, non-judgmental space, and I'm just going to get started. So we're going to start with Bill Alberti. Oh, absolutely. So each person will have 6 minutes to perform. At 5 minutes, Carol, who is at the back of the room, will hold up a sign that says 1 minute. And you'll have 1 minute to wrap up. But we have a little room, so if you want to expand a little bit, you're welcome to. Bill, your turn.
I'll probably leave it right in here. Thanks.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks to the Kingston Public Library for sponsoring April National Poetry Month. So I have a few poems to read. I remember Mama suffering from TV nostalgia. I hate reality television filled with bachelors, survivors, sharks, star dancers, and day court judges. I long to return to those thrilling days of yesteryear and spend my evenings engulfed in the gunsmoke bonanza of riflemen, rebels, and lone rangers. I miss my news delivered by trustworthy correspondents named Reasoner, Brinkley, Cronkite, and my laughs delivered by wholesome comedians I love, like Lucy, Carol Burnett, and triple-named Dick Van Dyke, Mary Tyler Moore. I want to make room for Danny, Mouseketeers, Howdy Doody, listen to Guy Lombardo, sing along with Mitch, and watch Lawrence Welk point his baton and, with a thick Polish accent, introduce Sissy and Bobby. Most of all, I miss Ed's variety show. Every Sunday night, right on this very stage, broadly casting comedians, impersonators, plate twirlers, ventriloquists, acrobats, and upcoming raw talents like Tom Jones, Barbra Streisand, Elvis, and the Beatles. Would I be willing to exchange my modern big screen color TV for rabbit ears to feature animals in black and white, like My Friend Flicker, Mr. Ed, Rin Tin Tin, and Lassie? You bet your life. We had tragedy, of course, this week with Notre Dame, and I looked back at a poem I had written when I came back from Paris on a vacation. It's a litany poem, and it will take you on a trip to Paris. And if I do it right, I have to read it fast. It's called Impressions de Paris. City of lights and love and life and death by the Revolution, guillotine, Les Miserables, ancient city on the Seine, Ile de la Cité, Baroque buildings, Pont-Neuf bridges, and a brown erector-set tower. Napoleonic Romanesque Arc de Triomphe and defeat, Sacré-Cœur, Notre Dame cathedrals and churches, Catholic city of Gothic gargoyles and garlic, fragrant parfum, sewer stench, savory bistros, restaurant cuisine and fast food chains, curbside cafe lunches, walking baguettes and flowers in bunches, vin and veal and croissants and crepes, pastries, fromage, fruit, fish, and fries. City of spike-heeled fashion, fur sleeves and collars, scarves, shades, cell phones, black leather, jackets, bags and boots, ambling struts, Champs-Élysées attitude. Multi-ethnic city of colors, cobblestone streets, speeding boulevards, Rue Claire food markets, the old and the new, the Bibliothèque Georges Pompidou, Moulin Rouge, Pigalle porn, Parisian beauties can born. Pointy nose and fishnet hose, high cheekbones, big dark eyes, thick wide lips pout to cry, fraternity and crime, city of kings and emperors, beggars and mimes. Your history runs deep, like blood seeping down into metro crypts, concierge cells where pickpockets, panhandlers, and musicians dwell amidst grunge and graffiti. City of mustard monuments and musees, carousels and cloisters, pastel bricks and bones, corner bars, fast-moving cars, Montmartre artists, saints and sinners, liberté, fraternity, equality, long live the evolution. Bad back blues. Yesterday I did too much. Today my back's in real pain. Yesterday I bent so low, now I gots to use a cane. Had to see a chiropractor, pretzeled me and gave me a pill. I went to see a chiropractor, left with one big hefty bill. Today is not a good day, 'cause I gots the bad back blues. Today it ain't no good day. I did work I should have refused. Now my muscles all in spasm, running up and down my spine. Oh, my lower back's in spasm. I'm all twisted like a vine. So I won't lift one finger. Of that I am emphatic. 'Cause if I lifts one finger, it might become sciatic. I don't believe in x-rays. Why take unneeded risk? I ain't going for no x-rays. I know it's bulging disc. The pain it sure is throbbing. Feels like I'm in a vice. My lower back's a throbbing. Think I'll go and get some ice and throw it in a tall glass. Add lots of whiskey to the mix. Then drink it down real fast. I'm nursing my own fix. My mother passed away a long time ago, but I remember her reading to me, one of my first readers, and my first introduction to poems, so I wrote this poem for her. It's called Once Upon a Time. I wished for a fairy godmother and a cricket conscience guide, 7 dwarfs to be my friends, and a Gretel by my side. I wanted to whistle while I worked and weave straw into gold, wear slippers made of glass and never grow up or old. I hoped to ride inside a pumpkin, build a house of sturdy bricks, climb up a magic beanstalk, and be wise to witches' tricks. I prayed to sleep in a bed just right, grow a long nose made of wood, sprinkle a path with breadcrumbs, and wear a Red Riding Hood. I learned lessons from the fairy tales. Never lie, always obey. Do not talk to strangers, and heed what parents say. I mostly was a good boy, rarely cried or complained, kept to the straight and narrow, not easy to sustain. I miss Mom reading the storybooks, the good times and the laughter. Her magic and love remembered lives happily ever after. Do I have time for one more? I try to write, when I take a visit somewhere, I always try to come back and write a poem about it. So this is when I went to Prague. It's called An American in Prague. At the Kulkovna Cafe, just off Old Town Square, in the city of 100 spires, I ordered a Pilsner Urquell from a waitress with a smile so broad it stretched from the Charles Bridge to Wenceslas Square. I discovered something. I'm fond of Czech women, the bohemian daughters of gypsies, earthy and exotic, with square faces, prominent cheekbones, flawless skin, and a disdain for hairdressers. Women of mystery who dress in dark colors, wear studded buckle boots, and brood with the alienation of a Kafka novel. My waitress returned, cast me a sly smirk, and placed a gigantic stein of beer in front of me. Testimony to my ignorance of the metric system. I pointed to something on the menu and she nodded, her universal sign for, you don't speak our language, do you? Music was playing, and excited to experience all that this foreign land offered, I listened carefully, expecting a gypsy love song, anticipating Mozart, stunned to discover Bob Dylan blowing in the wind. I was a teen again, living the cold threat of commies and missiles, dreaming of traveling to dangerous places like Eastern Europe, wondering how many roads I would walk down, listening for secrets whispered in the wind. My meal arrived, Moravian sparrow. and I discovered something else. I'm not fond of Czech cuisine, heavy with red and white sauerkraut and potato dumplings, devoid of colored vegetables, and skimpy on mystery meat, just as skimpy as their language is on vowels. I tasted everything, requested the bill, and paid in coronas, leaving my carefully calculated tip of either $8 or $800. As I headed for the door, I recognized another song, not by a Vladimir, but by a Lenin, and all it was saying was, "Give peace a chance." Thank you.
You took us to Paris. The next performer is Paul Doncaster.
This is a story, not a poem. Like a lot of firstborns, I was an adult pleaser growing up. It's part of the reason why I played youth hockey as long as I did. My dad was one of the founders of the youth hockey program in Somerville. He had me at skates at 3 years old, and I never got out of them. Just became part of the winter routine. But by the time I turned 14, I knew it was my last year playing, because the honest truth was I was just not very good. I was small, I was slow, I had no slap shot, I was always on the third line. I liked the games, but I didn't like the practices. So physically and psychologically, it just wasn't my game. I didn't have a future in it. I'd spent the previous year playing for Coach Murphy, who was very quick that entire year to give me that fabulous compliment he always gives to the worst player on the team, that coaches in general always give to the worst player on the team. Paul has more heart and desire and guts than anybody on this team. If we had a team full of Pauls, we'd win every game, which I knew was bull. He didn't want a team full of Pauls. He wanted a team full of Bobby Meskels. This was competitive youth sports. But as an adult pleaser, I took it. If that was my contribution to the team, if he thought that was my contribution to the team, I was more than happy to carry that flag. As sometimes happens in youth sports, this final year that I played turned out to be somewhat of a magical year. By the time January rolled around, we were undefeated in 2 different leagues, the only undefeated team in the state, other than the team that we were on a collision course with, Westford. The winner of that game being the favorite to go into the state tournament. This was a big deal in Somerville. They sent a reporter and a photographer to a youth hockey game. February 10th, 1979. I know this because I still have the clipping. Coach Murphy had us practiced. He put us through the ringer. He had us ready. And at the end of the first period, we were losing 5-1. And I knew what that meant. It meant I wasn't getting on the ice anytime soon. I'd lived it a million times. I was stuck on the bench unless the game got so out of hand that it didn't matter who was on the ice, or every other kid on the team dropped dead of exhaustion. But that didn't happen. And our goalie suddenly became a brick wall. And at the end of the second period, the score was 5-5. And now I was positive I wasn't getting out on the ice. But with the score tied, there was no way I was getting out on the ice. Beginning of the period, one of our guys got a penalty and went to the box. And Coach Murphy looked down at the penalty box and told him to come to the bench when it was over. Minute 30 seconds went by. He came out of the box, came to the bench. Coach Murphy opened up the door and had forgotten to say who was going to go out in his place. And I stood there right by the door looking at Coach Murphy with his mouth open, with the door open. It was one of those instances that was a split second, but in my mind lasted a long time. Long enough for me to remember every time I'd ever sat on the bench in an important game. And I thought to myself, I have fresh legs, I can contribute, screw it. And I took off out the door. I don't know if he ever called me back. If he did, I didn't hear him because I was gone, chasing everything in sight that had a red hockey shirt on. And within 30 seconds, I found myself trailing Bobby Meskel as he was going in one-on-one on one of their defensemen. And my job is to make sure nobody's coming in from the side to interfere with him. And just as he got maybe 10 feet away from the goal, he lifted up his stick to leave the puck for whoever it was he'd sensed was behind him. I got it on my stick, and I looked up, and I could tell, as small as I was, there was no way, with two people between us, there was no way the goalie knew where the puck was and who had it. So I picked a corner, glove side high, and because I didn't have a slap shot, I reared back, and I let loose with the hardest wrist shot I could muster. And I watched in slow motion as the puck went past Bobby Meskel, past their defenseman, over the goalie's glove, and into the net, 6-5. And as Mike Eruzione would do exactly 1 year later, when he broke a tie in the third period, my arms and legs were everywhere. And Billy Pappas tackled me, and I was at the bottom of a huge pile of 14-year-olds. And I clawed my way out, and I went over to the boards where all the parents were standing and jumping up and down, and I started banging on the glass saying, "Who's going to win this game?" And I went back to the bench, and 9 minutes and 30 seconds of regulation time later, Somerville was still undefeated, and Westford went home in shame. And the locker room afterward was a madhouse. All these 14-year-olds slapping each other and hugging and laughing. And Coach Murphy went to every kid on the team with a slap on the back and an attaboy, and I knew you could do it. Every kid except me. He never said a word. And he didn't say a word really to me for the rest of the season. The adult pleaser had displeased the adult. I'll be honest with you, it messed with my head. It took me a while to realize that that reaction said more about him than it did about me. But the more important realization I had is that sometimes our biggest challenges are our perceptions that we have of our own limitations. Because the truth of it is, everybody has it within them to be the hero of the game. Everybody has it within them to be the star of the show. All it takes is to be ready and to have enough gumption to say, screw it.
That was great. Thank you. Our next performer is Vaughn Keller.
Mr. Rogers. Fred, with that quiet voice of yours, it's been in my head for decades. 4 children, and yes, grandchildren, have all watched you. I'm in my late 70s now, and your voice, it's still there. I don't remember when the first time was that you got into my head. Possibly I was just passing through the living room, and the television set was on. Possibly I was cuddled up on the couch with a little one, and there you were. And there was your message. I like you just the way you are. How simple. I like you just the way you are. Simple? Yeah, right. If you were here right now, Fred, if you were here in my neighborhood, Plymouth, not your television neighborhood, my neighborhood, living with, well, they sort of look like adults, I'd show you it's not simple. Fred, you see, we have this thing on the internet called All Things Plymouth. It lives on this site called Facebook. Now, I know that came after you died. All Things Plymouth is supposed to be a neighborhood thing, a place to come together, to help one another out, to share news about our town, to ask questions. Good stuff, don't you think? A place where people could, if they wanted, like each other just the way they are. Sometimes it is like a neighborhood. Other times, though, I don't think you'd like it very much. People call each other stupid, idiot, and they call each other names. Racist, libtard. They lie about the world. Now, these are adults, Fred. At one time, they probably sat in front of a television set and watched your gentle soul welcome everybody into your neighborhood. Many of those you welcomed were very different than you. And Fred, you liked them, every one of them, just the way they were. You tried to teach that to my children and also to teach it to me, a parent. Fred, all of my children, now adults, watched and they loved you. And I was grateful when I was away that I had nothing to worry about what you would say or what you would do. I was grateful for what you were teaching. I never told my children until they were adults that while they were watching you, I was getting telephone calls, sometimes late at night. This was after I had left teaching and went south to work with the Community Development Foundation. I was called all sorts of names. You can imagine them. Communist, nigger lover, and on and on. I expected this in Mississippi, but I was getting it in Connecticut. But while this was going on, you were being gentle with my children. I hoped, Fred, I really hoped that their generation and the one that followed would be different. And now I live in Plymouth. While some of the names that are called have changed, the venom hasn't. Like them just the way they are? Oh, Fred, you ask so much of me, so much. I'm not sure I can do it. I know, separate the behavior from the person. That's my mother talking in my head. But the truth is, I don't like the way they are. I don't like what they've become as adults. Sorry, Fred, you asked too much of me, and yet you were still in my head, that gentle voice. It's still there, and I guess the fact that you're still there means there's some hope for me left. Okay, I guess I know there is. I do love this neighborhood of Plymouth, Fred. And I do know that there are people here who are good and loving and trying to solve problems and not shouting at one another. But still, sometimes I wish everybody would go back and watch your reruns. We watched you once. Maybe we should all watch again. And Fred, I so very much like you in the way you were. I'll never forget how you ended every show. You've made this day a special day by just being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are.
Well, Fred Rogers is my personal idol. The next performer is Betty Alves Whedon.
I have a story to tell, and the name of the story is The Little Brown Girl. Once upon a time, many years ago, in a faraway land called Plymouth, Mass., there lived a little brown girl. The little brown girl lived in a big white house on a high hill overlooking the town of Plymouth. Now, Stop and Shop is there. The brown girl was raised by her grandparents from the age of 3. She loved her home because it was surrounded by woods. Also, she grew up with many animals, such as rabbits and chickens, roosters, and a goat, and her dog named Sport. One day when she came home from school, she couldn't find her little goat. The little brown girl loved her goat. She asked her grandparents, "Where is my little brown goat?" And her grandmother told her the little brown goat was going to be for supper. The little brown girl was very, very sad, but had to remember what her grandparents had taught her. They always told her when they came here from the Cape Verde Islands, they had to work very, very hard. They wanted to buy a home, and they did. They also wanted to raise animals, have a large garden for food. The little brown girl was still kind of sad, but she understood because she had to understand about strong work ethics and being prideful and to respect all others. She had many chores. Her favorite was getting eggs from the chicken coop and picking blueberries in the woods behind her house with her dog Sport always with her. But there was one thing that she couldn't understand. The little brown girl couldn't understand why she had a pump in her kitchen and a little house in the backyard for personal needs. So she was very confused. It never bothered her when she was the little brown girl, but as she got older, she was very, very confused. When she visited her relatives and her friends, she never saw a pump in their kitchen, and she never saw a little white house outside of her home for personal needs. Her grandparents were very contented with what they had. However, as the little brown girl got older, she noticed the differences. And she was so embarrassed to tell any of her friends, particularly her teenagers, especially when she was going through high school. She just couldn't understand why she was so different. After the brown girl graduated from high school, her grandparents sold the big white house on the hill, and they built a home. And what she noticed right away as she ran through the kitchen, oh, guess what? I can turn the faucet out, and there was no white little house in the backyard. When she continued to take care and got older for her grandparents, they got older, and she began to become a very wise older girl. Because as she got older and she thought about the outside plumbing as opposed to indoor plumbing, there was one thing that was very important that she noticed. Nope, she didn't have the indoor plumbing when she was a little girl, and she had the outhouse, but she said there was one important lesson that she learned. The brown woman learned it wasn't the color of her skin that made her feel different. It was not having indoor plumbing. Until today, she's extremely grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Our next performer is Marilee Driscoll.
So I was driving here tonight, and by the way, I don't have any poems, and I'm so glad because I wouldn't want to follow you guys. You're so amazing. And I was thinking about my friend Helen, who passed away almost exactly 15 years ago. I hadn't thought about her in a long time. She was in her 80s when she passed, and she was a very close friend of mine. I would say she was like a mother to me, but because of the age difference, she was more like a kind of a grandmother, just wonderful. And she lived in Kingston. We met at Bible study at a Catholic church, which is in itself unusual because Catholic churches don't usually have Bible study. She was a very special lady. She would sleep every morning until about 10. It's okay. She would sleep every morning until about 10 a.m. Now, she had to, because she never went to bed before 1 a.m. in her 80s. And at about 9 o'clock was martini time, or should I say plural, just a couple of martinis. She was a hot ticket. I remember we would go out for dinner, and I still eat too late. I know I eat too late. We would go out for dinner we'd meet at maybe 8, get to the restaurant, and she would say, "We're not in any rush." Now, the places close at 10 during the week, right? "We're not in any rush." And she would order her martini. And I was always amazed because we would linger, we would be there for a good 2 hours. We weren't in any rush. And I would notice the level of her martini never fluctuated much. One time, I had gone to the ladies' room, because these were marathon dinners, just kidding. And I came back and I caught her. And I found out the secret why her martini glass never really ran out. She had a little nip of vodka in her purse. So she would tip it off. So that was magic. Of anyone I ever met in my life, she had every right to be bitter and just miserable. You see, she married very young, and she married a very handsome man, she said. He abandoned her, though, when she was pregnant. And she was strict Catholic, and so her dating, she was abandoned, she was still married. And to remain, her interpretation of the faith was she was stuck now for the rest of her life. She couldn't remarry because she didn't know if he was dead or alive. And she had one son, one child, and at age 23, he died of leukemia. So she was literally alone in the world. And I had the privilege of being with her the last few days of her life, and it was right around it was right before Easter weekend. So she passed away just before Easter. She was a really good Catholic. I'm not. I really miss her. And here we are on Good Friday evening. I was going to do a comedy skit. I'm going to transition to that, but it's a shitty set that I'm going to do. It's crappy. And you know what? Helen would have liked that. Because let's face it, tonight is Passover. Tonight is Good Friday. So any of us in the room, we're crappy Jews and Catholics, aren't we? So let's just own who we are. Let's just stand tall enough. Okay. So, true story. I ordered a hair elixir that was designed to restore the biome of the scalp. Doesn't that sound new agey in LA and like what the heck, right? Okay. Now, I have a small dog who has an attitude. He's a Chihuahua. He's a rescue dog. He has PTSD. And I don't know if any of you have animals like this, but sometimes if you leave them alone, even just for a minute to go out and check the mailbox and you come back, they'll leave a present for you because they want you to know they didn't like it if you left. So he's that kind of dog. So occasionally, you'll smell something. And it's like, really? I can't believe he did it again. Okay. So anyway, I was rubbing this very expensive hair elixir onto my scalp for the first time. And I thought, oh no, I smelled that smell. It's crappy. So I'm like, I can't believe the dog did it in the living room. And I walked over, and the rug is fine. What is that? It was the hair elixir that smelled just exactly like dog poop. So I was telling my adult sons, one lives in New York and one lives in DC, and I was visiting, we were celebrating one of their birthdays and we were all together. And I told them that story and how I thought it was hilarious. But I actually love the hair stuff, so I'm still using it. But so 2 days later, I got an email. You can see this. This is in my Gmail account. Dear Marilee, I am reaching out to you because you recently purchased our scalp detoxifier. We have noticed that on some product there seems to be an interaction between our coconut /radish preservative, and which is pretty funny right there, and the active botanical, wait for it, willow herb flower extract. This is expensive stuff. That produces an off scent. Since we do not use essential oils or scented material in our product, any such interaction is noticeable and unacceptable to us. Please dispose of the product, and we are issuing you a full refund. Thanks so much. Isn't that fabulous? Can't make that shit up. Okay. All right. I know, we're not supposed to swear, but I thought we could. Is this, I don't think this microphone's on. It's something shifted. Okay. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about, how am I on time? Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about is self-driving cars. Okay. I read a report that says something like 70% of the population would never ride or let a loved one ride in a self-driving car. Okay, really? Have you guys driven in southeastern Mass recently? Okay. Personally, I think I'll take my chances, but I have facts to back it up. Okay. How many people do you think have died as a result of self-driving cars? It's less than 5. I'm not sure what the number is. Okay. Some statistics. 9.4% of the population, the American population, used an illicit drug in the last month, meaning illegal. Now, that did include marijuana, which of course is legal here. But it also includes things like cocaine, hallucinogens, inhalants, and heroin. So that's 9.4%. So do that math. Okay. 1 in 6 of us, we know, are on antidepressants. And so that's about 16 to 17% of people that, may just decide to end it by hitting you. 1 in 8 Americans, 12.7%, are alcoholics. Okay, so now we probably shouldn't just add those numbers up because I'm sure there's some crossover. But maybe if it's not, the numbers are not good. In 2014, alcohol-impaired driving fatalities, 9,967 from alcohol use, driving fatalities, okay? And we said that 12.7% of the population was alcoholics in 2014. And let the record reflect, that was before Donald Trump even took office. So I think if, conservatively, let's double that. I don't know, okay. So self-driving cars are starting to sound a lot better to me. I don't know. So I have another card, but I'm going to leave that for the next time. Thank you. No, I'm going to leave it for the next time. Thank you.
I would love a self-driving car. Our next performer is Joanne Sylvia, and I'm going to support her. No, I'm going to hold.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah. if you could get a little closer.
Can you hear me? Good evening, everyone. This poem I'm going to read is about a man that fell in love with me and passed away, and he carved this flower for me.
If you can stay within 2 inches.
2 inches?
Yeah, there we go.
George, my love, the moon is out where the sun is shining, a warm heart with stars around them. Hear the heart beating of a drum from a distance. The moon is out. Look up. Smell the roses. I still look and see the shining star. My heart is beating into one. I can feel the drumming of my heart beating into yours. Someday, my hands can reach high to touch the moon, to feel the heart. When I touch the moon, I can feel your heart into mine. I can smell the red rose. They are floating in thin air. I will always smell the red roses standing outside the moonlight. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And the next poem is just something I thought of. Thunderstorm. Listening to your inner self of who you are, the power you hold within. Please listen. It is more powerful than you think. When the thunderstorm hits, look up and see and feel inside that you are. That is when you will receive a message from above. Listen carefully to the message you are given. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Our next performer is Catherine Cahill.
I wrote this poem quite a while ago, and it is a new day, a new place, how wonderful to see a new face, to meet a person and only to mention, to find out that we have the same intention. You give me that special inspiration to share my words for others to hear, to give me no criticism, but your kind words of wisdom. This can only be that you are a wonderful person who has the true intention of helping another to find her way, and by bringing it to my attention. That there is no right or wrong way to share your thoughts for others to hear. That it would be wrong not to write it down and perhaps tell a line or two. I am very grateful to find a person like you. I only hope that we can continue to share a word or two and let others know what words can do by bringing us closer together in plain view. This is from a friend of mine that I haven't seen in 30 years, and I'm seeing her next weekend. So I thought it was quite appropriate. And the other one I have is called Unconditional Love. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock moves so fast. One day she was born, and now she is gone. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock moves so fast. I turn around and see that she is really gone. Who was standing in her place but a young man? I cannot see his face. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock moves so fast. Could it be me, not willing to see, but yet to my surprise, it is someone with my eyes. He stands so close that I must look again to understand. I have no blame, I take no shame. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock moves so fast. So when I have a slip of the tongue, it's only a moment in time which was left behind. But I really know she is not gone, but they have become one. The phone will ring and I say hello, only to hear a deep voice, my mind is slow. So the words feel lost, I may mumble, I may stumble, but he knows it is only a moment in time. He has grown to be someone special with all his talents and drive to help people understand that all our hopes and dreams may always be alive. Tick-tock, tick-tock, the clock moves so fast. I hope he knows I will love him, which will always last till the end of time. Love, Mom. Thank you.
That was great, thank you. Now I'm going to introduce Kingston Public Library's own Mike Slauson.
Hi, everyone. I wasn't planning on telling a story tonight, but I was convinced by Elizabeth, so bear with me a little bit as I try to piece this story together. Back when I was in high school, my last couple of years in high school, my first few years in college, I worked at a store in Duxbury called Osborne's. I don't know if anybody frequents that store. It's a liquor store right up the street here, and I have to say this because my boss is probably going to be watching, other than working at the library, that was the best job that I ever had. I loved it. I was a shy kid, but something about being behind the counter, something about knowing all the people that came in, knowing all the regulars. I knew everybody in Duxbury. Every time I left the house, it was a running joke. I would see somebody from Duxbury. I went on a cruise. I went to the Bahamas. Sure enough, first day on the cruise, I see someone from Osborne's from Duxbury. But one day while I'm there, we had a regular customer. His name was David. Really, really nice guy. He was a dairy farmer in Duxbury, and he would come in and he would be covered in cow manure, stinking to high heaven, and he'd come in and he'd buy his scratch tickets 2 times a day. And he'd spend a lot. He'd spend a couple hundred each time on scratch tickets. And one day he came in and he bought his regular tickets, and then he went out to the car, scratched them, came back in for his second round, and then left, just like every other day. Well, later on that day, I'm working on the counter, and I see a piece of paper that's kind of jammed under the boxes of candy on the counter. So I pull it out, and I open it up, and it's a color photocopy of the front and the back of a $10 scratch ticket. And that scratch ticket on the photocopy was a $4 million winner. So I said, what is this? Is somebody just playing a prank on us? What's going on here? And remember, the photocopy is of the back of the ticket too. So I look at the numbers in the back, and I look at the numbers on our book, and I said, that's from this book. My goodness, who sold this? It went right through my hands. So a couple days later, David comes in and walks up to the counter, and he says, you recognize this? And he puts down the ticket on the counter, and there it is, the $4 million winner. And I said, oh, David, that's great. Congratulations. That's, I'm so happy for you. And he just kind of took it in stride, said, yeah, that's great. And he said, here, this is for you. And he had another scratch ticket that he had won $500 on. And that was he played so much that was a couple times a week he'd win $500. So it wasn't a big deal. And he said, this is for you. And I said, oh, David, you don't have to do that. Figuring that he'd say, no, just take it. And then I'd say, okay, and I'd take it. Well, that didn't happen. I said, David, you don't have to do that. And he said, okay, and he took it back. And I think I was 19, maybe 20 at the time, and I remember going home and thinking, oh, $500. Think of all the things I could have done with it. And it was bothering me. So a couple days later, I see David again, and I said, David, can I reconsider that $500? And he smiled and he said, I knew you would. And he had it in his pocket, took it out, and gave it to me right there. And that it didn't really hit me until a few years later that I think he was trying to teach me a lesson. I think he recognized me as someone who was kind of shy and who may not speak up when they want something. And I think he was teaching me that when you want something, say it. The other thing about David that has always stuck with me through the years, he passed away just about a year and a half after he won that $4 million. So I feel like he didn't get to enjoy it as much as he could have. But one thing that always resonated with me was even after he won the $4 million, he still came in covered in cow manure, stinking to high heaven, still worked his job every day on the farm. So David, if you're listening, thank you for the lessons, and I wish you could have had more fun with that $4 million.
So we still have time if anybody is interested in telling a story or a poem. You are? Come on up. Vaughn Keller.
Just a couple of quick ones. This one's called Maggie's Diner. In winter, the steam on the windows cracks the frost, and tiny rivers flow down the glass. As the men come in for morning coffee, hooded sweatshirts, down vests, and familiarity with one another as common as the clothes they wear. The cold is left outside as talk turns to politics and sports, and always the teasing and the nicknames of years spent together. Having morning coffee that gets set in front of you the minute you sit down. There is no need to order here, and any change would bring concern. Owner Maggie gets and gives teasing with the professionalism of nightclub comic, and everyone was really worried about her when she wasn't there one morning, and her sister filled in because Maggie was in the hospital having her gallbladder out. She offered to show her 4 tiny scars when she returned, but there were no takers, and the men expressed their relief with a simple, "Glad you're back." It had only been a week, but the world was out of joint, and her sister didn't tease much. So Maggie doubled up for lost time, and everyone laughed again.
Barbara, would you like to tell a story? Great. Barbara Dow.
The last few months I've gone through some tragedy, but I'm not going to talk about that tonight because I'm happy. Many years ago, the librarian came up and told him about the scratch tickets. Well, many years ago, I was like maybe 11, 12 years old, and my brother Tony and I, when it snowed, we saw green because we used to shovel snow. So that morning, we lived in Jamaica Plain, right near the Faulkner Hospital. I lived on Prince Street. He says, "Barbara, look, we're gonna make a mint today. Look at the snow going out there, coming." So Tony with his shovel and myself with the shovel, we go across the arborway, and this woman had a shovel. Her big driveway the snow was real high. So, of course, I stood back and I was watching my brother, really, the sweat coming down, clearing that snow. So when we got to the door, she came and she gave us $1. And I turned around and said, "Oh, no, that's too much." She took the $1 back. My brother had the shovel. No wonder I have back trouble today. All the way home, he was hitting me with the shovel. Till this day, he laughs. "Oh, that's too much." Well, I learned a lesson from that. Thank you.
Bill Alberti.
I'm going to do something that's going to upset a lot of people here, particularly with what's happened in the last couple of days. But I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Brooklyn and Queens, and whenever I didn't go to many games, but whenever my dad would take me to see my team, which was the Yankees, they always won. I thought that baseball was fixed like wrestling. And then I came up here and moved up to Massachusetts, and I went to a couple of Red Sox games, and they lost. And I go, something's wrong here. So I wrote a poem, because I do take a lot of flack when I wear my hat with my friends up here. But you can be comforted to know that my kids are Red Sox fans. And I root for the Red Sox when they're playing anybody else except the Yankees. So I wrote this poem called Nemesis, which means arch enemy. All around me are Red Sox fans, but I wear my Yankee hat, remembering my 50s New York team in the Bronx. When Dad took me to see the Mick and Whitey pitching left-handed to Yogi, secured in Bobby Richardson's defense and Roger Maris's big bat, they could negate any deficit for Casey's team. In the few games I attended, I never saw my home team lose. I thought baseball was fixed like wrestling. I don't don my hat for the prima donnas who take the field today, demanding millions for nose candy, fast cars, faster women, creating a hardship for dads who want to take their kids to see America's favorite pastime. Citizens of Red Sox Nation, the next time you see an old geezer wearing a New York Yankees cap, don't rush to judgment. He might just be suffering from nostalgia.
Any takers? No? Yeah, no. Okay, so I want to thank everyone on behalf of PACTV and Kingston Public Library for coming and sharing yourselves, sharing your poems, your stories, and your heart. Thank you.